After Bosnia, we returned to the United States. They offered up a few of us a chance to work with wounded warriors, returning them to their home station once they were stable and able to travel. So a few of us signed up for a long-term tour to just receive wounded warriors and then put them on our aircraft and take them back to their home stations. And that was an amazing experience. Being able to get those guys home and still support the operation even though we weren't actually deployed overseas. When it was our turn to go again, we ended up going to the Middle East and starting to support that operation. A lot of times we would do missions one day into Iraq, next day into Afghanistan, and just back and forth. When you fly into Iraq, there's always the danger of being shot at. There were times where we would fly over Baghdad and we didn't know if the tracers we were seeing were just part of the battle that was going on the ground or they were coming up at us. Sometimes it was pretty obvious they were shooting at us. There was a lot of really cool missions where we just spent the night over Baghdad, helping to manage the logistics on the ground to help the Army avoid IEDs and that kind of stuff. So we would sit there and basically watch the battle all night long.
One, you are now clear to engage the moving vehicle.
And there would be firefights going on all night long, but most of it was ground to ground. So we felt pretty lucky that we were above the fray, but always on our toes, thinking that at any moment someone could take a shot at us. So there was that constant reminder that we weren't safe. So the first deployment was actually probably one of my most interesting. We actually lived in Iraq. I would say that we were more in danger on the ground than we ever were in the air at that point in the war. We would just be sitting outside our hooch and rounds would come in from rockets. They would shell our positions nightly, pretty much 6 nights a week. We were under some sort of attack by rockets or mortars or whatever they were. And we had these guns. They're called Phalanx or Sea-Whiz, big Gatling guns that basically have a radar that can shoot down rockets, and that gun just happened to be right next to our hooch. So when that thing would go off, everybody would scatter because you didn't know what was coming down on top of you. They didn't have a whole lot of people injured. Luckily, the enemy wasn't that good at their job. But anytime they did get good, you could tell that the base would ramp up and say, okay, we got a guy who actually knows what he's doing. He's getting pretty close to hitting his target. So once we did have a guy who got really, really close to hitting targets on the base, and they went out, they took like 5 days to go capture the guy. That we watched that mission happen from beginning to end. Watched him get better and better and better, and then watched the Army go out and do their job and capture the guy, and then we ended up transporting him on a prison transport. So we had all the prisoners on the back of the airplane, and one of the guys ended up telling us that was the guy that was actually shooting at us. So that was kind of cool that he was not going to be available to shoot at us anymore. That was kind of nice. The Syria missions were probably some of our more challenging missions. Basically, resupply the army that was stationed in Syria. One of the common things that we bring to the warfighter is blood to help them with any kind of injuries, because it's a perishable thing. Even if they don't need it, even if nobody's injured, after a few weeks, that blood is no good. So we have to replenish that supply on a regular basis, even if there's no fighting going on. The other thing is ammunition. So those are two of the common things. Those missions are pretty high risk, so a lot of planning went into those, a lot of stress. The intelligence is the important part. We have an intelligence officer who comes to us with what the current dangers are of our mission, what kind of weapons might be used against us, that kind of stuff. We get a target drop zone and what time we're going to be there. Almost all missions are at night. the airdrops that I've done have all thankfully been on target and got where they needed to be with no damage. We also did some missions that landed in Syria on some dirt airfields, which was another rewarding experience to be able to actually get in there and support those guys. We landed on, I think it was Christmas morning in Syria, which was interesting to be there and bring those guys some Christmas presents and mail that they probably hadn't seen in a while. To be in the beginning and at the end, I would say that it's a little bit frustrating because the end is never what you think it's going to be. I don't think there's any satisfying way to end a conflict like that. I think that either way I was going to be just disappointed with the way it ended after all the lives and people that were affected on both sides. I don't think you ever find a way to end it neatly. You can't tie it up in a bow. I know a lot of people were upset with the way that we pulled out of the conflict, but I try not to get too upset about it. But, you know, could it have ended better? Of course, but I don't think anybody was going to be happy. My favorite thing to do is forest fires. I pretty much been doing that since 2012, and I've been on hundreds of fires, done hundreds of drops, and that's probably the most rewarding thing we do. So, but that's probably what I spend most of my summers waiting to do, is to hopefully get the call to go to a forest fire. Every year, California's been a hot spot for forest fires, and there's a lot of structure protection that needs to happen out there. So we end up spending most of our time in Northern California. But we've fought fires from Mexico, Texas, California, Idaho. I've been to probably forest fires in maybe 15 states. So it's one of those things you just never know what is going to kick off in what state, and so you're just ready to go. We get the call, we're loading up in 24 hours, and we can be on scene supporting the effort to kind of slow these fires down so that the firefighters on the ground can get a hold of the situation and try and minimize the damages. Basically, we are the last resort. We only get called after the civilian tankers are pretty much tapped out. So those guys are primary. So any forest fires are usually fought by those guys first before we are ever involved. So it has to be pretty significant for us to get involved. We don't necessarily go out there to save forests. We go out there to save structures and people is mostly our main mission. We are required to be led by a lead plane from the Forest Service or CAL FIRE or the Bureau of Land Management. So they're specially trained to work with us. We set up usually looking to drop from 150 feet to 200 feet is about where we want to be. And we'll be about 120 knots at 150 feet is what we're shooting for. Mostly the speed and altitude have to do with how the retardant actually lays onto the fire. And you want it to fall straight down and coat the fuel to prevent that fuel from burning. We're not putting out fires, we're preventing more fuel from burning. So usually we are putting that retardant away from the fire where they think it's going to burn and where they want it to stop burning. So they'll put that line in between where the structures are and the fire so that they can give themselves time to get the ground folks in there to build up a defensive line, basically. Over the years, I've done quite a few air shows. One of our old pilots got a job here at Tyler, Texas at the airport. And last year they were looking for people to come down and support the air show. So he gave us a call, and last year we were able to come and support. And we had such a good time that I was like, when I got home, I was telling everybody all about this air show, and we decided that we had enough interest to come back in here and repeat it again. We're at the Rose City Airfest. We're here to support Camp V, all the local veterans here in the community. It's such a great thing to see the support that Texas and Tyler, Texas gives all of our veterans. It's eye-opening when you come to this state and see just how many people come out to the air shows and support such a great operation, and the veterans that are here in the community. This evening, we'll actually be flying in the air show. There's a lot of great acts here. We brought down RC-130, and then we have an F-16, a couple F-18s, lots of heritage airplanes, World War II vintage airplanes. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be a part of it. We're not a demonstration team by any means, but we do a lot of interesting things with our aircraft. So we're just going to give a short synopsis in 7 minutes of flight time to just show what our aircraft is capable of. We are a tactical airlift aircraft, which basically means we fly about 300 feet above the ground in mountains and challenging terrain. And we try and fly as fast as we can, as low as we can, to keep the enemy from seeing us or engaging us. We'll try and show as much of that as we can. Okay, this is a 1994 C-130 H3 model. This is the newest H3 model that we have before we transition to the J model. This past year, we upgraded from a 4-bladed prop to an 8-bladed prop, and we put on a new, more fuel-efficient engine called a 3.5 engine. Basically an upgrade to extend the life of the C-130 without upgrading to a J model. It's a very capable aircraft. We got missile warning systems, we got flares, we have a LARCM system which helps with anti-missile as well. About 3,000 mile range, carries about up to 60,000 pounds of gas. We can carry cargo up to Bradley fighting vehicle. We've carried helicopters in the back. We can carry up to about 80 people or so, and then we can airdrop paratroopers as well as cargo. So they started off with the A model in 1953, I think. They've transitioned from the A to the B, and then it went to the E model, which was Vietnam era. And then we kept those E models up to about maybe 10 years ago. And then it went from the E model to the H1, H2, and H3, and now the J model. You can see if you look at the gear, it's a very robust gear system that can handle pretty heavy landings on unimproved surfaces. So that's pretty much our bread and butter, is going into dirt landing zones in austere environments all over the globe. And we can bring, like I said, we can bring cargo, we can bring troops, we can offload it while the engines are still running and be out of there in like 5 minutes. So that's kind of what this thing was built for. And over the years, we picked up extra missions. There's firefighting missions. There's one mission that puts skis on the wheels so they can land mostly in Antarctica. What is that saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. But they have special ops models. They even have a model that has guns all down the left side. It's a gunship model that has a cannon and can put a piece of metal in every inch of a football field. So pretty capable thing, pretty capable aircraft, and they kind of just use it for whatever mission they're looking. That's usually where they go, is for a C-130, because it's been, proven for, what is that, 70 years now almost. Come on in. All right, so this is the cockpit C-130. We got 2 pilots. Aircraft commander sits here. Co-pilot sits here. This is the flight engineer. We got 4 throttles here, 4 condition levers. This particular model is a half glass type cockpit. So we have screens here, the actual digital screens. This particular model I've been flying for 23 years. I would say 6,000, maybe 7, I don't know, 6,500. I actually stopped keeping track a long time ago. All right, this is the cargo compartment of the H3. It's basically pretty versatile. Right now you see a configuration where we just have a few seats for passengers, but we can seat people all the way down the walls and all the way down the center if we have to. A lot of times we have some passengers up front and we leave it back for cargo. 2 load masters run it back here, and they can reconfigure the aircraft depending on what we're doing that day. Each side of the aircraft we have paratroop doors. Paratroop doors are primarily for static line airdrop. Basically 82nd Airborne, Fort Benning, Georgia, those guys, we do a lot of training with them where they'll go out the paratroop door. We also have the ability to drop the ramping door and do cargo and passengers, or excuse me, paratroopers out the back of the aircraft. I was telling you earlier that this is a special qual to go off the ramping door. Usually you have to be Special Forces or Army Rangers. Those are flight control cables. So if we need to find out if something's wrong with them, it's a lot easier not to cover them up. Makes sense to just leave all the coverings so that we don't have to remove anything to do a repair. And like if we had to do something airborne, we'd want to have access to it. Most of our flight engineers are former mechanics. Everywhere we go, we travel with, if we leave home station, we travel with 2 mechanics, and the crew chiefs are sort of experienced in everything. They're not specialists. They know a little bit about everything so they can do on-the-road repairs. And the flight engineer, our particular flight engineer, he's real experienced. He used to work on engines. So the fact that now he's on the airplane makes me feel a lot better, because when something's going on with the airplane, he usually knows exactly what the problem is right away. And we don't have to call anybody and figure it out. So it's really, I actually handpicked this crew because it's my last flight. So I got the best of the best here with you.
This is your last flight?
It's my last trip off station. So when I get home in September, I'll have a final flight. This is the last trip I'm gonna take. So this is officially my last trip after 29 years of being in the Air Force. So my unit was really nice to help me get to this air show, and then I got to pick my crew. So I handpicked all these guys because they're my favorite guys to fly with, best of the best. And I just wanted to go out in style and be with my closest friends. So there they are in all their glory. I tell you what, we couldn't do this mission without any of those guys. I mean, everybody has their duties that make this whole thing happen. And the pilot is just one cog in the wheel. So when one day maybe we get rid of this aircraft and we have to go to something else, I don't want to lose one member of this crew. They're just too indispensable, in my opinion. And I just don't want to go on the road with missing any of my boys, you know. This is my 29th year, looking to retire here in September. I was probably supposed to retire back after 28 years, but I wanted to give my unit one more fire season. So that's why I picked September, to give myself this summer to try and support another forest fire operation. We only have a few guys that do that mission, so if I can get a few more guys trained up this year to take over for what I do, then I think that would give me a sense of completion. This job it's been the best thing I've ever done. But it's time for me to give my family the time that they deserve while they're still young enough to really experience having me around. I kept doing this as long as I did because I thought it was important to show my kids what a life of service is. I wanted them to be old enough to have those memories of their dad serving his country, and maybe one day they'll do the same. I don't know. It's bittersweet. Let's just say that. These guys are my family, so it's gonna be hard to walk away, but it's time. It's time for somebody else to take it and enjoy things like this, the air show. Next year, someone else will get to do this, and I won't be taking up the seat. I'll have somebody else will get to enjoy all the perks of being a veteran here at the Rose City Airfest. My dad has been trying to fly with me for my whole career. We've always had this big plan to put him on the airplane and take a trip with me. Because he's a veteran, he could fly Space A on a military aircraft. We never did make it happen. And then on this trip, I said, Dad, I'm going to this air show. Do you want to? It's the last chance. So he actually got on the airplane and Space A down here and got to see me fly. He's only seen me fly from the ground. So it was kind of cool to have my dad standing over my shoulder, watching me do what I do. And then we got the family on a commercial flight, and they're down here. So I've got my wife, my son, and my daughter, who are 9 and 11, and they're over there having a good time at the air show. They're all set up, ready for Dad to fly his final flight, and it's pretty cool to be able to see your dad do that kind of stuff and have those memories. And I'm hoping that one day, when it's time for them to decide maybe they want to serve their country, and maybe they'll have those memories to draw back on and make their decision if that's something they want to do. They're even wearing t-shirts that says my dad is the C-130 pilot. It's kind of a little bit cheesy, but that's pretty cool.